Today, I am going to talk on chapter 7 of the book, The Jewel Ornament of Liberation. And chapter 7 is instructions on meditation on loving kindness and compassion. Since this book is both a translation of most of the book and also commentary by Kenshin Trangu Rinpoche, he begins this with his own introduction. And so this meditation on loving kindness and compassion is the remedy for attachment to the pleasures of samsara, and especially peace, trying to find peace in samsara. That we do experience that from time to time, and we get attached to it very easily. And especially when meditating, we can get attached to peace. And everybody wants peace, just like happiness. But peace means liberation from samsara, not peace within samsara, which is totally different. What most people want is they want to remain in samsara, but you might say have a better deal. So it's important for the practitioner to avoid this obstacle. That attachment to peace leads to Hinayana nirvana. And we kind of covered that, talked a little bit about this previously, about the fruition being peace. And in this case, that is seen as the fruition of the arhat. An arhat is a person that has conquered the kleshas, the conflicting states of mind, and as a result has attained a state of peace, but has not cut through duality, and as a result does not attain full Buddhahood yet. So we don't want to stop at being attached to peace and going no further. We want to attain the ultimate destination, which is complete, full Buddhahood. So to get beyond this attachment to peace that you experience when practicing and meditating and so forth, we need to develop our mental strength, our courage, and our determination. This is very important, and it's our responsibility to help others achieve peace and liberation too, not just for ourselves. So this is the distinction that is made in Tibetan Buddhism between the Hinayana path and the Mahayana path. So the text then goes into the practice of loving kindness and the practice of compassion. And the practice of loving kindness is first, and it's divided into different sections. The first one is the classification of the practice of loving kindness. And there are three distinctions made at this point here. The one is these as sentient beings being an object of loving kindness and compassion. And here we consider sentient beings in their suffering, and we try to develop a strong wish to accomplish true happiness of Buddhahood for them. So that is using sentient beings as an object of loving kindness and compassion. The next is using phenomena as an object. And what this means is that seeing that all sentient beings suffer because they do not understand karma and do not understand what to avoid and what to do to avoid suffering. But with our understanding of karma and the causes of suffering, this can lead to us developing this aspiration to help sentient beings understand the causes of happiness and the causes of suffering, and help them lead a life accordingly, following this understanding, and to eventually attain liberation. The third way to look at this is without a reference point. And this is the way a Buddha and a Bodhisattva would see things. And this is done with an understanding of emptiness. That this is seeing the beings suffer due to their projections and believing in their projections. And a Bodhisattva or a Buddha would just see them as projections, but realize that they are projections and nothing else, that there is no inherent reality or substantiality or permanence. So that is the, you might say, the highest understanding is this loving kindness with no reference point. The second is about the object of loving kindness and compassion, and that is that true loving kindness is impartial, that a realized being would not favor those that are kind to them, are nice to them, do nice things to them, and then have some aversion for people that are nasty or perhaps even hurt them. That true loving kindness is impartial. And so the object is all sentient beings without exception. The third point is identifying characteristics. And very simply, this is the wish to help others find true happiness. And the emphasis is on true as opposed to a temporary happiness. Because as temporary means, any kind of temporary happiness will be short in duration. The fourth point is the method of practice. And so there are 4 contemplations. And quote, reflecting on the kindness of beings because love depends on being mindful of the kindness as its root. So if we can reflect on the kindness of others, this will lead to love developing within us and growing and strengthening. But traditionally, it is taught that one meditates on the kindness of one's mother. And Khenchen Tranggu Rinpoche adds at this point a very contemporary commentary, and that is that now it is common to be angry at your parents or even hate your parents. I know Lama Karma told me once that in Tibet, one's mother is looked at almost like a deity. But that is not the case in the 21st century, at least in this country. So he cautions that it is a mistake to be angry at or hate your parents, and this leads to negative karma, and as a result, negative uh, situations in the future, a lot of suffering in the future. He tells the story of Moon, and this is a story I've never heard before. I do not know the source, if it's a modern story, if it's an old story, but Moon is the father, and he has a son called Little Moon. And Moon's father was living with them. So there were 3 generations in this same house. And his father, Moon's father, as he got older, got more and more difficult. And finally, Trangu Rinpoche says he put him in a box and, in a basket, and then put him in a cave. And Little Moon then eventually found out what was happening, and he said, well, I'm going to need that basket when you start getting uh, difficult to live with. And when the father heard that, then he changed his attitude towards his father and brought his father back into the house. So it's a story that basically says what goes around comes around, or you cannot avoid karma, and your actions will have results later on. So it's very important to contemplate the kindness of our parents, even if you've had a difficult relationship with them, that if you really think about it and think about the different things that you have benefited from by being born and so forth, you will come up with a pretty long list, even if you've had a horrible childhood. So there are 4 contemplations to help develop this loving kindness and gratitude towards our parents, especially our mother. And to think about our mother's kindness. And quite honestly, we can't even begin to list every action that our mother has done in these 4 categories. So the first category is that our mother has given us our present body, and that our present body was covered earlier in terms of a precious human birth. And along with that precious human birth, that we have come in contact with the Dharma and have received teachings from teachers and are practicing the Dharma and so forth. And so we have these various opportunities and freedoms that were discussed in chapter 2 about precious human birth. We can travel the path, we can meditate, we can comprehend teachings, and so forth. And certainly, even in a mundane sense of the word, it is much better being born a human than it is in the 3 lower realms, the animal realm, the hungry ghost realm, and the hell realm. that there is a lot less suffering in the human realm and a lot more happiness, even though it might not seem like there's a lot of happiness in the human realm, and some humans suffer tremendously. The second point to contemplate about our mother is that she had many difficulties on our account. Difficulties while being pregnant, difficulties giving birth, infant care, feeding, changing diapers, up all hours of the night, taking care of the young baby. And he makes a very important point here, and that is that our mother accepted us when we arrived. She didn't ask for credentials. That she accepted us upon arrival, and she was protective of us. The very fact that we are still alive means that when we were young and could not protect ourselves, somebody took care of us. In some cases, of course, it might not have been your natural mother. It might have been an adopted mother. It might have been a grandmother or grandparent, and so on and so forth. But at least our mother gave us our body, and our body is very precious to us. And I like this, he said, and she put up with us. And when we contemplate this, he says, quote, "How could we ever tolerate that someone like this should be unhappy or suffer?" And the third is that she contemplate what she did to preserve our life, to keep us alive, to do what is necessary for us to be alive when we couldn't take care of ourselves. That she tried to help us from having accidents, getting into trouble, falling, and so on and so forth. That she kept us safe to a certain degree. And finally, she educated us. She toilet trained us. She taught us to speak, to communicate, helped us learn to walk, help us become more independent, and so much more. And now here, I am going to add a little commentary in terms of the way life was when Gampopa wrote this versus today. Back then, there was no such thing as public education. That you were born most likely to a nomad family, and you were brought up in the nomad family, and you married, and you might even still be living right next to or in the same tent with your parents. And so much of what you needed to know, you learned from your parents. Nowadays, of course, there's public education where we learn a lot from people outside of our family. But still, the basics we learned at home. And I thought I would talk a little bit about my my own experience, because I grew up in a home with my mother being mentally ill, and she would at times become violent and become hysterical and so on and so forth. And when I came to Buddhism, I had a lot of anger towards her, needless to say. But the more I contemplated things, the more I looked more deeply into things, I realized that these points that Trungpa Rinpoche is making here, that the Gampopa made originally in his book, are true, that, I received a lot of pain at home. I received a lot of benefit. And among others is this precious human birth, and that I was taken care of well enough to survive, to learn, to, and in fact, I have found that some of the, you might say, the ethics and the training that I received, uh, which at the time maybe I resented or even hated, made a lot of sense. But it was possible only by letting go of my anger that I could start seeing the benefits that I received from mom and dad, and also that mom suffered. This really gets into the next section, which is about compassion. But the reason why mom behaved the way she did was that she was experiencing tremendous suffering. So my advice is to let go of the negative and concentrate on the positive things that you have received from your mother or your parents in general, and actually from all people. That if we concentrate on the negative, it just leads to the wrong direction and ends in a very bad place. That it's really important to look more deeply into the benefits that we have received from our mother, our parents in general, and all beings. So the advice is here to contemplate these, to look deeply over and over and over. Rinpoche says, until you realize it is true, that a sign that this contemplation is working is that gratitude arises. And then, of course, to think and contemplate that all sentient beings have been a mother to us in a past life. And this is not just something that, oh, it helps develop compassion, but it probably isn't true. It is true that we have had a countless series of past lives, and an endless, you could say, series of past lives. And we have been the child of every sentient being, and the other beings have been a daughter or a son or a partner or any other kind of relationship you can imagine, because we've had this endless series of past lives. So it's important to remember this. Now, the next point is the benefits of this. Oh, I missed the measure of practice. And that is, this is wishing for the happiness of others becomes as strong as wishing for our own happiness. So this is an indication of the quality of loving kindness blooming. And when this blooms, then we will start doing as much for others' happiness as ourselves. And of course, we need to practice till we reach that level. And this is talking about being concerned for all beings' happiness, not just some people or some beings. So the benefits of this is that this is the source of happiness for oneself, and it is the source of happiness for others. That when we treat others with loving kindness, they respond. I have, for instance, even found sometimes I'll talk to the checkout clerk at a store. And I just had a conversation with one a few days ago, and she mentioned, and I can't remember why, but she mentioned how some customers have been very difficult lately, and that it's sometimes difficult to be in her position. And on the other hand, if when you're going through the line, you maybe say something nice to the person, or you just ask them, how are you doing? That this can brighten up their day a little bit. So loving kindness is wanting or wishing others to be happy, and that they will find the causes of happiness. Basically, this is the first immeasurable of the four immeasurables. And once this is perfected, compassion is not difficult. Compassion will follow. So the next section is on compassion. And basically, it is to have empathy with others. It is to wish that they are free from suffering. And understanding that beings don't understand the causes of suffering, and that our being indifferent is not a place that we can stay at, that we have to understand that they have all helped us in some way or another in the past. So he goes through a similar set of points. The first is the classification of this practice of compassion. And the first is compassion towards sentient beings in a state of suffering, any sentient being in a state of suffering. And thinking about the suffering of the lower realms, the hell realm, which is the suffering of heat and cold, of being tortured, of all kinds of incredibly painful types of suffering, beaten up, stabbed, boiled, on and on and on. And the hungry ghost, or the Preta realm, is the suffering of starvation and thirst and never having enough and never being satisfied. The animal realm is suffering from, it's sometimes called stupidity, that just not having much understanding of what's actually going on, being very focused on what's right in front of you and not much more than that, and having very strong habitual patterns. And he describes human suffering as excessive activities and constant frustration. And I thought that was a really good way of summing up the human realm: excessive activities and constant frustration. So by thinking about these kinds of sufferings in these realms, this will help us develop the wish to free them from suffering. He doesn't talk about the two God realms here. Later on, we will get to that. So the second point here in the topic of classification is to consider the nature of things, to consider karma, understand karma, that people may seem to be happy, but they carry the causes for future suffering, that confused beings do not know how to create future happiness. In the human realm, we can be quite good at pursuing happiness in the present, but not knowing karma or ignoring karma. In pursuing present happiness, we create lots of negative karma and set the stage for lots of suffering in the future. So this is the second point, to consider the nature of things and karma. The third is compassion with no referential object. And this is, again, the understanding of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, that suffering is not real. Its nature is emptiness and interdependence. And as a result of that, it can be eliminated. If it were real, then it couldn't be eliminated. So this type of compassion is directed at those who think they are suffering, even though their suffering has no reality. And again, it is directed by beings that have experienced emptiness. If you haven't experienced emptiness, you really can't fully understand this compassion with no referential object. So the next is the object of compassion, and that is basically all sentient beings without exception, every last one of them, without bias, without discrimination. Compassion without distinguishing between friends and enemies, that is devoid of indifference. And the way to help is to, of course, look at relationships from past lives. And so he tells the story of Katayana. And it's, to kind of sum it up, it's a story of this Arhat who, one of his accomplishments or cities was that he could see past lives. And he saw this man eating a meal, and it was a fish, and there was a dog there that was by him that was trying to get some of the fish. And so he kept kicking the dog to keep it away from the food. And he was holding a young child in his lap. And Katayana, having the ability to see past lives, realized that the man was eating a fish, which was the rebirth of his father. The dog that he was kicking was the rebirth of his mother, and that his son was the rebirth of his enemy. And so he is eating his father, kicking his mother, and coddling his enemy. So the point here is that friends and enemies are concepts and are not valid. And on top of that, in this life, in just one single life, enemies can become friends and friends can become enemies. That we waste a lot of time and energy on anger and attachment, and it's not permanent. So this is a very important point, that even in this life, things can change dramatically and quickly. The third part of this meditation on compassion is identifying characteristics, and that is wishing that others may be free from suffering, and especially the causes of suffering. And basically, this is the second of the four immeasurables. So now he goes into the method of practice. And so he has various meditations. The first is a meditation on compassion for those in the hell realms. And you can use your mother or some other being that you have a lot of fondness and loving kindness for, and visualize that person in front of you. This is a bit like Tonglen in terms of the way it is set up, but there's no taking and sending. You're just imagining what's happening to this person in front of you that you are very fond of. So it says, imagine that a gang of people attack that person that you love and causes a lot of harm, maybe even death, beating, breaking bones, stabbing, burning, putting them in boiling water. And to do it in such a way that this terrible pain that they are feeling wells up in you too, and compassion arises. And when that happens, then step back and contemplate this and just think about this is what it is like in the hell realms, and that the hell realms are full of people that were once close to you in previous lives. It's not wallowing in this feeling of the incredible suffering in the hell realms, but allowing it to have compassion well up in you for these beings. And so then the next is a meditation on the hungry ghost realm. And again, it starts the same way, visualizing someone close to you, in front of you, as before, and then imagine them starved and thirsty, looking like maybe Auschwitz, and in a lot of physical pain. And all kinds of other suffering from craving, not finding what they're craving. And a quote, we feel that there is nothing we wouldn't do to stop this situation for them. So do this. This would literally be a practice, these meditations here, to help bring up and increase loving kindness and compassion. But the point is to do these things so that it increases your feeling of wanting to help beings in the various realms. So then the animal realm, it's the same setup before. You visualize someone you are fond of or love in front of you. And then imagine that they become unable to speak and that their mind becomes cloudy. And other beings come in and force our loved ones to work very, very hard, like like let's say a water buffalo in Southeast Asia, perhaps a yak being used to plow the ground in Tibet, perhaps a horse. There was a story in the news about a show horse that the rider was disqualified because he hit the horse. I don't think the person ever asked the horse if he wanted to be a show horse. You get the point. So animals can be overworked, work very hard. It's a bit like slavery. They can be beaten. And a lot of animals are eventually killed. Domestic animals are eventually killed. Even milk cows, when they don't produce enough milk, they go to become hamburger. So animals are dependent and helpless. And this contemplation and meditation is to help compassion arise for animals. He doesn't go into wild animals, but I think you can use your imagination and imagine what it is like to be a wild animal and being so helpless. And most animals are the prey of some other animal, and there, of course, is no medical help and no protection from the cold or the heat, and so on and so forth, that it's a hard life. being a wild animal. The next is meditation on the suffering of the higher realms. And here he lumps all of them together, the human realm and the two God realms. And it's necessary to have compassion for these beings too, because even though they might be having a very happy time at the present with very little or no suffering in it, eventually they will experience tremendous suffering. So again, start as before with this loved one in front of you and imagine that they become blind, and near them is an abyss, that there's a cliff there that they could fall off of, and they're unaware of it. And there's no one to warn them. There's no warning sign or rope or guardrail or anything to protect them. And this is the situation of the higher realms, that beings in the higher realms are in danger of falling into the lower realms. They don't know that they are producing the causes of being reborn there. They're not concerned, and that they don't even know how to give up the causes of being reborn in the lower realms and don't care. And so we need to develop this feeling that there is nothing that we wouldn't do to stop them from falling off of that cliff, to help them get out of this situation. Then there is the measure of perfection of the practice. And this is very simple. That is when the feeling is genuine and strong. The wish to protect all sentient beings from suffering and to help them be happy. And to finish up this section, he talks about the 8 benefits of this practice. First of all, in kind of introducing these 8, they were actually 8 immediate benefits. But before that, here is a quote. If we were to hold one quality that represents all the other qualities of the Buddha in the palm of our hand, it would be compassion. So this is the ultimate benefit, that compassion is the one quality that represents all the other qualities of the Buddhas. If we have that, the rest is no problem. So there are 8 immediate benefits that we will experience mostly in this life from having a loving, compassionate mind oriented towards benefiting others. So the first is that when we are loving and compassionate, everyone will be that way towards us. So whatever you do returns to you. This is the nature of karma, that you'll be free of hatred and jealousy, and you won't radiate hatred and jealousy to others. Simply put, when you smile at people, they will smile back. Second is people will try to protect and help you, that you will have friends instead of enemies. The third is that you will be happy and mentally at ease. You will not have a monkey mind full of conflicting emotions, worries, and so on and so forth. Then the next point is that you will be happy and at ease in your body, that you won't have problems about worrying about people physically harming you. And he doesn't say this, but it's pretty well known in today's world that stress is a major factor in physical health, that it has a very negative effect on physical health and even life expectancy. So if we are happy and at ease in our body, we are not going to be having stress that is causing problems to our body. It's actually the next 2 points, and that is freedom from fear of poison and weapons. And this needs a little bit of explanation. And I'm going to start out by saying that Tibet, when Gampopa wrote this, and really up until maybe even the present, was a bit like the Wild West. That I don't know how common it was, but it was not unheard of to have people poison another person. In the Nyungne book, there is a story of the woman who killed many people. And she killed these people through poison. Rinpoche, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, told the story when he was here one time. And basically the story is that the woman, her husband was a merchant, and he would travel to south of Tibet, probably Nepal, maybe even India, and would be gone for long periods of time, buying things, bringing them back, and then selling them in Tibet. And while her husband was gone, she had an affair with another man, and she had a baby, and her son, who was, I'm not sure how old, but still a child, he was aware of what was going on. And the woman, when she gave birth to this child that was conceived with this man while her husband was gone, she killed the baby. And the husband now is on his way back, and the son says, well, when Dad gets back, I'm going to tell him what's been going on here. And so she killed her son. And then the man, the merchant, comes back, and he has some people that he was with traveling, other merchants, and they invite the neighbors over to celebrate his return. And meanwhile, the maid, oh, and I think there was a llama in the house too that she poisoned. And then the maid told the husband after he returned before the party, well, this is what's been going on. This is what your wife has done. And he told her, well, tonight we'll party, tomorrow I will gouge out her eyes. And of course, the woman heard that, and she poisoned it, put poison in the beer, and everybody ended up dying except for her. You might say the moral of the story was that she then she asked a High Lama, what can I do to purify all of this that I have done? And he said, well, you do 8 Nyungne in a row. And I won't go into that story anymore, other than saying that poison was the choice in this case, and it was common. And also weapons, that there was, again, a bit like the Wild West in Tibet, and the Khampas, people from Kham, which is Eastern Tibet, and that's where Trungpa Rinpoche came from, Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche, Tralag Rinpoche, and a lot of other Kagyus came from this area. And it was, people would fight each other and with weapons and so on and so forth. So Here, the immediate benefit is that you are free from the fear of being poisoned or being attacked with weapons. So then the seventh of this list of 8 is that our efforts will be successful with a minimum of effort because we have others there helping us. Might be one other person, or it might be many people that will help us. And the last one is, this has to do with our next life. And that is that we will have a good body in our next life, and that we will be in a good position to practice the Dharma, that our next life depends on our motivation and our actions in this life, and that pure motivation and actions based on loving kindness and compassion leads to an excellent next life. Quote, the new life we take will be the very expression or the very embodiment of the loving quality of our mind and actions in our present life. So here are some questions. The first one, isn't peace in your mind a good symptom of freedom from your kleshas? And yes, if it is true peace, you are not going around from place to place to place being controlled by your kleshas. So that is an indication of peace, unless it is being attached to the piece of meditation where you kind of are just making a fence there and blocking it out, but you really, as soon as you quit meditating, you run into a difficult situation, and then maybe the peace is gone, and maybe now you're angry at this troublemaker that spoiled your peace. So that's my answer to the first question. Can you change realms in the same lifetime? Not, I can say yes and no. In this book, Trungpa Rinpoche is talking about separate realms that you are born into, and you spend your whole lifetime in that realm, and then you die, and then you're reborn. Some teachers, Chogyam Trungpa did this, also explained these realms are psychological states that we can visit very quickly. We can get angry, and then the anger is gone, and now we're jealous. And then the jealousy is gone, and now we are just kind of in denial, and on and on and on. And we can go through these realms very quickly in our day. And I like to explain it this way, that if you look at it that way, there's usually one state of mind that we are expert in, and there's another that we have competency in, like in a resume. That some people are lovers, some are fighters. You probably heard that when you were in high school. And lovers sometimes are jealous, and so on and so forth. So, but in this book, it's talking about actual physical realms. You're born in the human realm, you will remain in there until you die. And then when your karma directs you in that bardo between this life and the next life, then you'll be born in another body in one of the 6 realms, and so forth. You could look at it as things being solid, that when you're born in the human realm, it is pretty solid. That's where you're going to die. You're not going to die in the animal realm or another realm. And then how do you visualize these horrible things and not feel anger and want to rush in and protect your loved ones? The point is to have this feeling arise, but Of course, since this is a visualization, how do you rush into the visualization and protect them? The idea is to contemplate and experience this and help it develop your compassion and your loving kindness then for all beings. So it's like, don't stay there. The question is, how do you stop from having nightmares about this? The one is that you have to realize this is just a visualization and that you're using this to develop compassion and loving kindness. Now, if you have developed some mental stability, then you are not going to be so affected by holding on to this and then at night having nightmares. Now, if you're having nightmares at night, then don't do this. The point is not to scare you, but the point is to realize that other beings are really suffering and that we have this relationship with these beings through previous lifetimes. And this is why we start with someone that we are close to, because we can develop these feelings easiest for people that we are very close to. And again, remember that this is just a visualization. This is just an exercise. It is nothing more than an exercise in developing. The question is that some people who have caused great harm, perhaps to somebody that I know, perhaps to a family member, how do I have compassion for that person? And this is difficult. These are perhaps the most difficult people to have compassion for. We start with the ones that are easiest to have compassion for, and that is those that we are close to, like a mother, a grandmother, a child, somebody, a close friend, a partner, and so forth. We start with those, and then gradually we work further and further away. In here, he doesn't talk about it directly, but there is the practice of Tonglen, which is a great practice to help doing this. And Tonglen is taking and sending and receiving. And so again, you start with someone that you're very close to and you love, and then you gradually, and you take on visually their suffering and you give them your happiness. And then you work out people further away, friends, acquaintances, people that you have neutral feelings about. And then eventually your enemy, and you start with an easy enemy, not a hard enemy, maybe someone that you're irritated with at work. But then gradually you work up to very difficult places. The questioner mentioned sexual abuse as a child and so forth. And this is very, very difficult. It is, I guess it's in terms of the person. Now, this is a little different way of looking at it. But looking at yourself, if you look at yourself, you can look at yourself as a victim, as a survivor, or an experiencer. And if you look at yourself as a victim, you're defining yourself by that experience. You know, this is who I am. And if you view yourself as a survivor, you're still putting this up pretty much close to the top of this is who I am based on this one or this series of incidents of sexual assault or whatever. It could be cancer. And if you look at it as I am someone that experienced this, It's just an experience or a series of experiences that you've had out of many, and you don't define yourself by that. And this can help you at least lower your anger and resentment and so forth towards the perpetrator.